There are a couple of announcements that we need to do before we start. I know that some of you have already heard it for the third, fourth time already, but it's important for the ones that are arriving that we have simultaneous translation available to Spanish and Portuguese. And thanks for the voluntary work of our amazing interpreters, graduates of the course of Quixote. And we are going to be sharing the Instagram account if you need their services. And if you are joining us now and you missed the previous sessions, let me quickly say that I'm Abril Chimal and I'm together with Thais Prado, and we created Women for Futures with the intention to give visibility of women in the field, to reflect on how they are intersecting identities, form practices, and engage with gender issues using futures and foresight. If you haven't seen the full program yet, here is the link. And also you can scan the QR code, and we hope for you to stay with us as many sessions as possible. And also, last but not least, we have a code of conduct that it's very important for us to create this safe space for us to interact, think together, and co-create. And we will be sharing these documents, and by remaining in this session, you are agreeing to following it. And we are going to stop sharing the presentation. And also, please, for those who hasn't present yourself in the chat to the people that is joining, if you could write your name, where are you coming from today, and one word to describe how are you feeling right now, it will be amazing. Thank you so much. And I pass it over to you, Alice, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can, but we cannot see you.
I know. I'm just going to take one more second and see if I can get my phone to get my camera working. Sure. So we'll just let people introduce themselves and then I'll see if I can get my camera. I don't know why it's not working. I've been on calls all morning, so we'll see.
Feel free to maybe, even like leave and come back, Alice. Meanwhile, I will share here another screen with a Miro board that we are collectively populating here with the sessions that happened so far. So as the session happens or after the session, if you want to just populate here with your post-its or stickers or ideas, words of everything that stood out for you during the session, maybe one learning, one insight, anything. So then we can create this kind of collective intelligence here together. So I will put the link of the Miro board in the chat so we can collect the things that we want to keep when the sessions are over. And feel free to use it as you'd like. So I'm going to stop sharing and see if Alice... I don't think Alice is...
Hi.
Yeah.
Sorry. Thais, could you try text me where we were before, a link, and I'll see if I can put that one on my phone. Otherwise, we can just start and go from there. I have some slides as well, so I will get those to share, and then we can see if I can get my camera going.
Abril, can you put the link of this?
Yes. Yeah. Of what? Sorry?
No, of this Zoom meeting in the WhatsApp.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay. So tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki tēnei kōrero, ki tēnei wānanga. Welcome from Aotearoa, New Zealand. I come from Te Waipounamu, or the place that we call the place of the Greenstone Waters, which is the South Island of New Zealand. Ko Alice Diamond tōku ingoa, Heuria hau no Kaitahu. So I come from a tribe, or a Māori tribe called Ngaitahu, and that is the land in which I stand on today. We're going to start with what we call a karakia. So always when we do our work or prepare to do things together, as Māori, we always start with something we call karakia. And karakia are really incantations, and they just help to prepare us. So I'm going to say this, and then I'll talk a little bit about what it means. So, tākina te karakia, tukua te wairua kia rere ki ngā taumata, hei ārahi i a tātou mahi me tā tātou whai i ngā tikanga a rātou mā, kia mau, kia ita, kia kore ai e ngaro, kia pupuri, kia whakamaua, kia tina, haume, huie, tā iki e. So again, welcome. That karakia I have chosen to use because it's a karakia that speaks to reaching our potential. Like I was saying, so this karakia talks to the fact that I'm just going to take this off, that we're going to be today trying to do our work where we're trying to pursue those ancestral traditions or the wisdoms of our tupuna or our ancestors, and that's part of what we're going to be doing together today. Let's start by who am I? So like I said, I am from a tribe called Kaitahu or Ngaitahu, and I work for an organisation called Tokona Tiraki or Māori Future Makers. Our organisation, we sit under the mana of Te Runanga o Ngaitahu, so we sit under the authority of our tribe, which means that we work for and behalf of our tribal members, and our work is really to empower and equip our people and other people in Aotearoa New Zealand with the skills to be able to imagine and create better futures. I also want to reference that I'm part of a newly formed collective called Design Futures Aotearoa, and that work is alongside Dr. Cheryl Doig and Victoria Mulligan and Jay Tang Taylor, and our work is really to promote foresight and futures work within New Zealand. Also shout out to Next Generation Foresight practitioners. That's how I met these wonderful people from that have organised this today. And it's also how I've connected into a project called Futures Methods from around the world. And that project is really where I see some of this work is kind of, that's where it sits within the work that I do. And that's because that project is around trying to look at how we can use alternative or non-dominant or non-Western perspectives to unlock new futures and to challenge the kind of dominant status quo ways that things are done. So I've called this work, this workshop today, Wisdoms of the Past and Compasses for Our Future. So the workshop is going to ask participants to explore proverbs that they know from their own culture, community or context. And we're going to consider how these ancestral wisdoms can act as a guide to navigate us towards better futures. So in our culture, in Te Ao Māori or in the Māori worldview, we call these whakataukī, and proverbs, so they're just proverbs, and they play a really important role in the way that we do our work. They have been passed down from generation to generations. It's kind of clues to how our ancestors saw the world, viewed and interpreted the world around them. So they're important in our worldview because oratory has really always been really important to us as Māori, but also this kind of link between honouring the wisdom or thoughts of our ancestors is a big part of how we do our work. So in therefore kind of a futures space or a futures thinking space, we always do our futures work with kind of honouring and reconciling with the past, but not being bound by it. So we're always kind of looking for how do we take those things that our ancestors believed and thought, honour it, and then take that into the future. When we project into the future, look at how the knowledge of the past has kind of informed our present and therefore what lessons we want to take into the future. In my experiences, that's quite similar to how other Indigenous cultures around the world look at their future making work, and kind of that's, I guess, maybe the key difference between some of the
Western futures work and the work that we do. So why proverbs then? How does that come into this equation? Well, it really, I just came up with this idea that if we needed a quick way to kind of get a snapshot into a window into people's cultures and communities, and starting to think about the alternative or different ways that we all think about the future. I think proverbs offer kind of the snapshot between generations of that kind of intergenerational thinking, and that there would have been many things that our ancestors said that we haven't retained. So therefore, the ones that we've retained are the things that our ancestors, I guess, wanted us to remember for our future, and that they've been therefore offered possibly as clues for how we navigate our future. There's also this kind of idea of if we look to these proverbs, we can start to understand how we all see things differently, or possibly alike, and therefore what that can mean in the way that we broaden our perspectives to be able to create, I guess, more collective and inclusive futures. So shortly, what I will be doing is asking you to consider proverbs from your own culture, community, or context, or family, as a way to better understand yourself, ourselves, one another, and generations past and future. So together we're going to try look at these questions. We're going to look at what our proverbs reveal about the values and beliefs of our communities, what they can reveal about how we see the world, both differently and alike, what could change for our futures if we paid closer attention to these ancestral wisdoms, and how might they expand our perspectives to shape more inclusive and collective futures. And I actually was reading a book the other day, and it said that if you want to know a culture, then know their proverbs, which I thought was a good kind of thing to remind ourselves as we do this. And there's no single definition of what a proverb is. So it can be anything. It can be something that offers wisdoms, truths, morals, traditions. So when we go through this work, and we will start to think about what are some of those kind of wisdoms we've gained from the people around us. Oops. Let me just flick through. Okay, so before we go into the interactive piece of this, I just want to share some proverbs from my culture and my community so that we can kind of start to prime some of our thinking. So the first one, hukia ki o maunga kia puria koe i ngā hau e tāwhiri mātia. So this proverb means return home to your mountains to be refreshed by the healing winds of tāwhiri mātia, the god of wind. What does that reveal about my culture? Well, I guess to me, it talks to the importance of home. It talks to the importance of familiar things, of family, of places and people, and that connection as well between land and the spiritual realms. So we take a really kind of holistic view of how those things are connected. And also we take a really holistic view of health and how family and spirituality is connected to physical and mental health. The next one is kia whakatōmuri te haere whakamua. So this one you might, if you've had any experience with Māori futures, then this is one that you've potentially heard before. It's brought up a lot to kind of represent the alternative way that we as Māori see the future. And it's loose translation is that I walk backwards into the future with my eyes fixed on the past. And it really, this proverb kind of talks to the connection between past, present, and future. It has words in it that reference both past and future, but also in front and behind. And those words are different to the way that we might have an interpretation in the English language. So this kind of reminds us that in a Māori worldview, there's a real continuous trajectory between past, present, and future. And that our past as Māori is directly in front of us, able to be seen. So therefore it needs to be dealt with, it needs to be acknowledged, it needs to be sometimes reconciled, but it also needs to be honoured. And we need to be able to do that in order to move into our unknown future, which is behind us. So we're walking backwards into that unknown future. The last one, whatu ngarongaro te tangata, toitu te whenua. So this one means as humans disappear from sight, the land remains. So this one, you know, I'm sure that we'll see familiar concepts like this across maybe some of the ones from your context, but it just is reminding us that the way that we view land in our kind of cultural perspectives is that humans are not superior, therefore land cannot be owned, and instead we are the kaitiaki or guardians of that land for the kind of short time that we are around. So as you can see, these proverbs kind of reveal something about who we are as a people, and hopefully, therefore, as you listen to them, it's kind of starting to broaden your understanding of how different cultures and communities see the world. Now, the question in terms of linking this, therefore, with futures work is what could therefore change if we used these proverbs to help us to kind of navigate to the futures, if we use them as compasses for the future. The thing that I was interested in is if we paid closer attention to them, what could they mean for our future? And possibly if we use them as design prompts, then what could they mean for our future? So I had to think about what these ones could mean, and you know, so we have the first one, hokiaki o maunga, and if we were paying closer attention to this idea of returning home to your mountain to be able to be refreshed by the healing winds, then maybe I can imagine a future where we prioritize living in the place that our genealogy ties us to. Cities and suburbs might be designed to offer connection to those ancestral landmarks. We might prioritize family and spiritual life. We might have time built into our days, our lives, our work lives, to retreat to those landmarks for restoration. The next one, if we were to pay closer attention to this proverb, then I can imagine a future in which intergenerational thinking is built into all decision making, and future generations thinking isn't just about making a good decision for future generations, but it's also about carrying the voices and needs of past generations into that future, allowing our past grievances to be reconciled in a way that ensures the mana, or the power and authority of both past and future generations, is uplifted and upheld. And then the last one, if we were to pay closer attention to this idea of you know, humans not being superior to land, then I can imagine a future where we act as humble guardians for the land, where we see our relationship as one of stewardship, and the concept of owning land is no longer so our systems are set up to recognise that the health of the environment is paramount and humans are the stewards entrusted with its care. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to move into doing some work on this together. So I'm going to drop a link in the chat. And that should take you, sorry to change if you've been using Miro, but this one will take you to Mural. So we're going to have to get familiar with a new piece of technology. So if you can all join that mural board, I'll give you a few seconds and hopefully you can get in. If you're having issues with working out how to enter, you just need to enter as a guest. You don't need to make a profile on the software. Okay, so if you have added yourself now to the map, the second activity is down the bottom, you'll see what are your cultures and communities. And I just want you to take a moment to just, on one post-it note, maybe just jot down to you, what is your culture, community, context, or family? And I know this question can be difficult for some people, so just think, what does that question mean to you? So when you're going to be thinking about these proverbs, then what kind of cultures and communities are you part of, or possibly you're a good ally to, that you want to be thinking about today? Okay, I'll give you another minute or so to do that activity. Okay. So in a moment, I'm going to pull you to the next activity. So be prepared to be moved in 1 second. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at some of our proverbs. So in a moment, grab a post-it note. I'll add a few more because there seems to be more of us than I expected. And if you could just add a proverb from your culture, community, or family. And like I said, there's no single definition of what a proverb is, but usually offers kind of wisdoms or truths or traditions or viewpoints. So grab one post-it and write that proverb down on it. You're welcome to use other languages, but if you could, it would be great to be able to see the English translation if you feel comfortable sharing that. And then down the bottom, if you could just write kind of the place or culture or community that proverb comes from, that would be great. And as you can see on the far left top, I've done an example of what that might look like. So I'll give you a moment to do that. Oh, I can see some people have already moved on to the next activity. So that is great if you have. So once you've got your proverb, what you need to do is pull it down to below that where the next section is. Again, I'm going to go through and add some more post-it notes. But the idea is that you move your proverb and then answer the next question, which is now that you've got your proverb, what does that reveal about the values, beliefs, or worldviews of your culture and community? And if you could just take a moment to, on the grey post-it notes, include that. So I've also, again, put an example on the far left if you need it. But just take a moment to think about what does that say about who you are and who that community is. Cool, I'll give you a few more minutes to do that. I can see that there's some proverbs that are still to be moved. Okay. I am going to, in one more second, actually, we're going to stay in this spot. So, what I would be interested in doing is just opening up the floor to anyone who would like to speak to theirs. So if you would like to come off mute, we'll have a few people share. So if you could just share what your proverb is, and then just speak to your grey post-it note in terms of what you believe it reveals about your cultural community. So if anyone's brave to be the first one to speak up.
I'll go ahead because I'm the nerd that always raises my hand first or says something first. I have to point out the proverb that I wrote is something from my parents, and my mother, who's here, actually wrote it down as well. So I think it's kind of a perfect like family subculture moment in the Zoom today. But basically the proverb is, when we have it, we share it, and when we don't, we hope someone else will. And for me, it's always spoken to the importance of generosity, but also of accepting help when you need it. And so there's this mutuality to generosity. And I can think of, I mean, during the recession when we were little, that was the thing that was always part of my childhood. And so I was like, what is the cultural essence from my childhood? And I was like, thanks, Mom.
You're welcome,
Awesome.
honey. I feel like I feel called to add, because in our life, our culture isn't very the cultures that were mixed and mingled to become her family, our family. We looked for pieces of wisdom and information. And so thinking about that, it was really intentional for us to figure out how to put that together. So it's fun that you thought about it. And thank you for bringing it in.
Awesome. Thank you. Can we hear from one or two more?
I can go. Mine, it's the one that it's in Spanish. I cannot find it. Okay, so it's in Spanish is el que quiere azul celeste que le cueste. Y el que quiere buen mole que muela su chile. So it is talking basically about food and the sky. The sky is blue, but it really reflects that things needs effort, and the value of perseverance and respect for tradition, specifically for food. And mole, it's one of the more the most typical dish, Mexican dish, and it takes a lot of time because it has a lot of ingredients. So you have to have a lot of patience and dedication to really get the mole correctly. So it's pretty much about that. And also it's talking about food, of course. For being from Mexico, it has to have food in the proverbs.
Thank you, April. One more.
I can go, and I think it's interesting, Abril, that both of us went for like sacrifice and work. Mine is God helps those who wake up early, you know, so as if God only helped those who wake up early. And I hate waking up early, just to. But yeah, it really reflects this idea of Catholicism and sacrifice and yeah, being worth it, of help when you do your part first.
Thank you, Thais. Does anyone else want to share before we move on? Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you just a moment, like about 30 seconds, to just scan and have a read of everyone else's post-it notes. And then we're going to start to talk about patterns. So when you're reading, I want you to just be noticing what you can about the different ways that we see the world, and start to think about how are they different, and then how in other ways are they alike. So I'll give you a moment to do that. Okay. And now if you follow me over to the pattern section. So keeping everything that you've just read or heard from the wonderful ones who shared, what we want to do now is I want you to think about what you notice. So what do the proverbs reveal about how we see the world, and how there's possibly patterns in terms of similarities between cultures. Maybe you heard from April, and food is also a big part of your culture, or returning to traditional ancestral landmarks is a part of your culture. So have a think about some of those patterns, and just this is a space to have to just drop down some reflections in terms of what you're noticing about the differences and similarities between the way that we see the world. And I'll give you a bit longer to do this activity, so plenty of time to have a good think about it. Okay. Again, I'm going to open up the floor to now have a bit of a conversation about this. So we can just kind of do this in any way that people want to. If they want to jump in when other people are speaking and offer contributions to what someone else is saying, then feel free. And we can kind of start what we call a wānanga, which is a space to be able to kind of make sense of things between ourselves. Something I noticed was that there were a few talks about like interconnection and interdependence, and connection often to each other, but also to land. And I think that is interesting because that's a big part of the way that we see the world as well. And we have a concept in our culture called whakapapa, which is all about interconnection, and it's connection between ourselves, past generations, future generations, but also connection to other things greater than us. And everything has a whakapapa, so everything is connected and has connections to other things. So if anyone else wants to share anything that they've noticed that they picked up, or any ideas they had from reading other people's things as well, now's the time.
I can help summarize what we're seeing across the board. It seems like there's a lot of themes around being tied and connected to our home and our communities and the land and where we're from and nature. We're seeing a lot of themes around interconnectedness and reciprocity. And ways of being, the way we eat together, how we are together. It reflects values, whether that comes from our communities or religion or our families. And it's interesting to see sort of like several dichotomies, right? Like there's individuality versus community. There's the individual burden versus the collective. There's abundance versus scarcity. But I think like throughout it sort of reflects sort of like these guidelines that have maybe been passed on from the generations about how to live. But what would y'all add? What did I miss?
I can go. Yeah, I think also for me jumped out was how some seem to center individual versus some seeming to center community. It also came to mind for me kind of like seeing some that were presented in languages beside English. And I wonder what is kind of lost in the translation. So the word that I shared was whakataukī, which is very difficult to translate to English because it kind of encapsulates a lot of concepts and ideas. So I wonder what language itself does in terms of our understanding of some of these proverbs and kind of their essence or their teaching.
Thank you, Sam. Lovely to see you.
You too. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, Sam, I think I left my proverb or whakataukī in te reo Māori because I found it quite difficult to translate that into English. And for my context, it's so the whakataukī was ngā pāpaka o rangatawa he paruparu te kai he taniwhanga tangata. And I basically said that it related to I guess the strength and collective. But yeah, I'm also seeing that there's a need for balance, I guess, if we're looking for the individual versus community and all of these verses between these different values. So it's I guess it could also be a tohu or a sign of what is happening across the world between how people connect to themselves and to the cultures or the environment around them.
Thank you, Rangimari. Anyone else who would like to offer any reflections?
I'll add something. One that stuck out for me was being visible. So with proverbs like closed mouths don't get fed and actions speak louder than words, they seemed, yeah, there's these kind of tensions between the individuals, or these dichotomies, right? Individualism and collectivism, and those ones kind of spoke to me about, like, I just thought of how can we be more caring, so that although they are useful proverbs, I think proverbs as a whole, we can actually question them. Like, some of them may not be actually serving us today. And so, yeah, I was just thinking, you know, lots of people in my community are actually quite quiet, and we read between the lines, read between what's not being said as well. So I just thought that was like another interesting kind of dichotomy there.
Yeah, thank you. That's something I hadn't thought of. So that was great. Thank you. Any final reflections before we move to the next exercise? Okay. If we go back to our mural board, I will pull you into the next space. So if you come to the section compasses for our future, so question mark, compasses for our future, can they possibly help us to navigate towards new futures? So the next exercise is now kind of, I guess, where all this thinking has hopefully been priming us to get to, which is, I want you to now use these proverbs as a design prompt. So what I want you to consider is what could change for our futures if we paid closer attention to these ancestral wisdoms. And thank you for the offering that we just had about maybe we should be paying closer attention to them. So you can do with that what you want in terms of the activity. But I'll just give you an example. So I did talk to this before, but from the one that I used around returning to your mountain to be refreshed by the winds of the of Tawhiri, then that could be that you would write something like, I can imagine a future where we prioritise living in the place that our whakataukī ties us to. So the prompt is, I can imagine a future when, or where. And I just want you to kind of create a bit of a narrative around, if we were to pay closer attention to your proverb, which you put on the left-hand dark purple post-it note, then what sort of future could you possibly imagine? So if you just want to record your proverb, again on the dark purple, then we can see which ones relate to which future scenarios. So this one I'll give you again probably around 5-10 minutes to do, and then we'll do some sharing back. Okay. I'm reading these and they're amazing. So what I want to do now is give people space to maybe share theirs and speak to it. So if anyone would like to, the space is yours. So maybe just share your future scenario or future narrative, and then if you've got any further things to say about it, we'd love to hear.
I can share. So mine came from my grandfather, who's Hungarian. And the proverb is, don't bet in a game, you don't know the rules. And he was a bookie, which in the United States is like an illegal sports bettor. So it's how he made cash on the side when he and his family immigrated here. And so it's kind of an interesting to learn from your grandfather that, like, you know, there's risk in games that, like, you shouldn't play, and to try to think smartly about that sort of stuff. But growing up, I kind of felt like it was such a negative way to think about the world. It was like, oh, people are playing games and there's rules, and, you know, people take advantage of you and whatnot. And then through these prompts, it's like, okay, you can sit with, you know, maybe bad or traumatic experiences, maybe that's your reality, and you can envision a more positive future. And so I took mine to think of a future where people aren't taken advantage of, that systems are like simple They are clear. There's no like tricks or gotchas. Um, it's easy to navigate a system, and that like people, that the sense of taking risk is something that you can do with like thought and intentionality, that you can do it with feeling like you have support, that you're not kind of like pushed into taking a risk, but you can do so excitedly. So that's mine and kind of what it made me think about.
Thank you, Taylor.
Hi, Alice. I can have a share, and it's really great to be able to be in this space with you. I can see a future where wherever we are from, we can bring our whole selves to everything that we do. And in particular, I think from that metaphor around a coconut not falling far from its roots. So even though you might go through processes of transition and maturation, and when you do fall, you're still held by what brings your essence and life. And so you can bring your whole self because you are held by that network, that and that I think means that you can, in that collective worldview, that governance and decision making will look completely different than it does now. Thanks.
Thank you, Emily. And thank you, because Emily and I ran the session in Dubai, so great to have you here, Emily, so that we can see each other's sessions, because we were part of a kind of bus stop workshop session.
I can go. I realized that, like, considering what I share and I share, that we are in a very fast-paced culture and about extreme effort, so you can have value. So I think that this future, or I can imagine a future where we can learn to enjoy the process and slow the pace and whatever the outcome is, and that doesn't have to be perfect. Yeah.
Thank you.
I was thinking a kind of a callback to the session with Shvika about enough, because mine was imagining when we have it, we share it, and we don't. We hope someone else will, and that just we can realize we do have enough, and that there can be plenty, and then imagining that it doesn't seem that difficult to imagine, because there's plenty. We have enough.
Thank you.
Okay, I already spoke.
Okay, I'll give a couple more seconds in case there's. Please, Maria.
Okay. I just got excited by mine, I'm not gonna lie. Just go back to I forgot to mention before, but in the Māori culture, there's also the part of who is saying the proverb or whakataukī. So the person who said our whakataukī about ngā pāpaka or the crabs or all that sort of stuff. They were a really revered chief, and the fact that he was speaking about my people like this back in the day is a sort of a guide on how other communities could work. So I said that I can imagine a future where communities are self-sufficient and self-nourishing in the best and hardest of times, that the efforts inspire others to lean on one another, care for each other, live for each other, and bind together. And so I wanted to express that because I worry that with the state of the world is that we're disconnecting, and I feel like people are stronger when they're together. And we have a concept of papakainga in Aotearoa, New Zealand, which is basically like, I don't know, like living communities, I guess. where they're specifically designed so that people can connect and they have opportunities to connect and interact with each other. They grow food together. They share food together. Yeah, they do everything together, and it's an intergenerational thing as well, where like those people that grow up in those papakainga, they most likely will have grandchildren that will also grow up in that papakainga and all that sort of stuff. So I could see that suburbs and communities are designed in that sort of way to encourage interaction and relationship building, and where people can become more than a neighbour, and therefore communities will never be poor and are wealthy. Not just money wealthy, but culturally wealthy and healthy. Yeah.
Thank you, Rangiwari. That's beautiful. Okay. We're going to move to the final space. So we have 3 questions now that we're going to slowly work through. So I will ask to be followed if you want to be led in the right direction. So this question is because part of what we want to do is we want to explore how this kind of activity or these proverbs could expand our perspectives. And the work that we do at Tōkuna Tiraki is all about trying to create kind of more inclusive and collective futures, and therefore more abundant futures. So I think what I want to do now is just give you a time to reflect on this question, which is, how might proverbs expand our perspectives to shape more inclusive and collective futures? And you can think about that in terms of like the activity. So how might the activity today shape more inclusive or collective futures? Or just some of the proverbs that you heard today. And if you would like to, you can move on to the next question, which I can see some people have. So we also have, what is the value of this workshop or this activity for broadening our perspectives? And I guess the last 2 questions are kind of about the value of, I guess, this sort of activity or this sort of way of thinking, and maybe these sorts of ways of doing our futures work. So I guess part of just some context is that as part of the project that I spoke about right at the start in the Futures Methods from Around the World project, we're really interested in how this sort of work can shape new futures, unlock new futures, how often non-visible or like hidden knowledge systems and knowledge and wisdoms can shape futures that we maybe haven't thought about. So just want to give you time to, I guess, offer any, this is sort of like helping us to test our hunch. So is there anything you can offer in terms of maybe what you see as being the value for broadening your perspectives, or and then the next one for unlocking new futures? Okay, looks like people are starting to stop writing. I'm loving reading all these great reflections in terms of the value. We are nearly about to wrap up and close up for this session. I would love to hear from anyone who has any kind of closing reflections, if they'd like to speak to this last piece around what is the value of this sort of work and how could it shape more inclusive futures or expand our perspectives or unlock new ways of being and doing. So I will stop talking, and if anyone would like to jump in with some reflections.
Someone wrote pluriversal discourse set in a tangible way, and that really was something I was experiencing during this, is like all of these, like this pluriverse of everyone's experiences, and how like being able to see everyone's faces or names, and then also the proverbs, and sort of like move with them with everyone else. I feel like I got to know things on a different level than I would have just like reading them. And so hearing people's voices and all the different ways of engaging was really lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll jump in and say something. I thought it was really great because it managed to connect futures work, which can be quite abstract and really distant and out there, and made it much more personal. And so you've got more meaning, you've got more emotional connection to it. And that also gives you personally more motivation to actually do something, and it sticks with you. Because I think also a thing about futures work is that it can be like really out there. And so you kind of hear the same thing, but you don't see people having the courage to like follow all those things or take action on all those things that have been being said repeatedly. So yeah, I think like that personal motivation, making that emotional connection is a really great part of this.
Thank you. Okay, any final reflections before I close us?
I think
Okay.
I really liked how you talked about not being bound to the past, but acknowledging the past. And I think this exercise is exactly that. How can we learn from the proverbs, the pasts, maybe the forgotten wisdoms of our communities, but at the same time, how often we are just like following a kind of like a communal belief without not even realizing that we're just like following this conditioning, right? So it's good to reflect about those.
Thank you. That's a great reflection. Okay, so I'm going to close us. I'll use a karakia like I did at the start, so another kind of incantation to be able to close our time together today. I'm happy to stick around if anyone has any questions. Otherwise, thank you so much. This has been incredibly valuable in terms of, I guess, testing a theory in terms of how this sort of way of thinking could maybe be used in futures exercises. And Thais and April, thank you so much for convening this space. We're so lucky to have people like you doing things out of the goodness of their hearts, and it's so great to have a space for women to come together and to explore futures in different ways. So thank you. So kua ea te kōrero nei, kua ea te wānanga nei, kia turiki whakataha ai, kia turiki whakataha ai, haume huie tai ki. Thank you. And happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, thank you so much. And we will see you next time.
I have a question, just because I'm a naturally curious person. Your necklace, I'm curious about your necklace. Is that an okay, as a curious person and a person of the future and thinking about artifacts and beauty, I just was drawn to it. Is that an okay question to ask?
Okay. So this is what we call it pounamu, which is right at the start. I said I'm from a place called Te Wai Pounamu, which means the greenstone waters. So this is the greenstone. So we collect it in like that's part of our kind of cultural practice, is to collect greenstone, and then we carve it into taonga, we call it, or what's the English word for taonga? Kind of special pieces to be able to wear.
Thank you. That's beautiful.
This has been gifted from my family, and the practice is that the pounamu you gather is gifted to someone else.
Beautiful. Thank
Thank
you.
Of course.
Thank you so much, Alice. Thank you so much, everyone.